By the time Brittany called to tell me which room would become the nursery, I had already worked out, to the dollar, exactly how much my own family had cost me. The number was sitting in a shoebox on my kitchen table. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. It was a Tuesday. An ordinary gray Tuesday in late October, the kind of Philadelphia day where the sky can't decide between rain and nothing. I was at the stove in the house on Belgrade Street, the house Tadeusz and I bought in 1986, the house where I raised my son, making the kind of coffee my husband used to make. Black, no sugar. The pot he liked, the one with the chip on the handle that I never replaced because replacing it felt like saying he wasn't coming back. The phone rang, not my cell. The landline, which only 3 kinds of people still call, robocalls, the church, and my daughter-in-law when she wants something and wants me to think it isn't a big deal. Martha. Hi. Quick thing. Brittany always opened that way. Quick thing, as if my time were a drawer she could reach into. I want to tell you who I am before I tell you what she said, because it matters to how I heard it. For 31 years, I sat in a room with no windows and answered the worst minute of strangers' lives. I was a 911 dispatcher for the city of Philadelphia, and for the last 14 of those years, I ran the night shift. You learn things in that chair you can't unlearn. You learn that most people who are screaming are not actually in danger, and some of the people in the most danger are perfectly calm. You learn to ask one question. What is happening right now? And to keep your own voice flat while the world comes apart in your ear. We had a phrase for it, the older dispatchers. Situation or crisis. A situation is loud. A crisis is quiet. Your whole job is telling them apart fast enough to send the right help. I was good at it. I was the one they put the trainees next to. 31 years, and I never once let my voice shake on the line. Not the night of the row house fire on Memphis Street, not when a boy no older than my own called in about his father and then went silent. You hold steady or people die. So I held steady. I tell you this so you understand. When Brittany said what she said, my heart did something, but my voice did not. We've been talking, she said, and honestly, this house is just so much for you. The stairs. The upkeep. Daniel and I think it's time you looked at something smaller, easier. There's a really nice place over in, she named a complex out past the boulevard, the kind with a brochure that uses the word community a great deal. And it just makes sense with the baby coming to start setting up your room as the nursery. We'd need it by the spring. Your room. She said it the way you'd say the spare closet, my room. The one with the window that catches the morning over the rooftops where Tadeusz and I slept for 34 years. I held the chipped pot in one hand. I did not set it down hard. That's not me. Don't be selfish about it, Martha, she added, gentle as a knife laid flat. Family comes first. And here is the thing I have never told anyone, the thing I'm telling you now. In that exact moment, I was not angry. I want to be honest, because anger would be easier to explain. What I felt was the old click, the one from the chair, the sound in my own head that meant the call had just changed category, situation or crisis. For 3 years I had treated my son and his wife as a situation. Loud, yes, demanding, yes, but manageable. Something I could keep flat and keep handling. Standing there with my husband's coffee going cold, I understood I had gotten my own categories wrong. I had been triaging everyone's emergency but my own. Okay, I said, just that. Okay, Brittany took it as agreement. She always did. She said something bright about color schemes and let me go. I set the pot down, gently, the chip facing the wall, the way I always do. Then I pulled the shoebox toward me across the table. It was an old one, from a pair of shoes I bought on clearance 2 winters ago because the heater had eaten that month's spare money and new boots could wait. Inside were receipts. 3 years of them. Bank transfers, a credit card I'd let them use, the heater I never fixed, the dentist bill that wasn't mine. I am a woman who, for 31 years, listened to other people decide too late that they were in danger. I was not going to be one of them. You don't decide who you are in a crisis. You find out. The chair taught me that. Whatever you practiced when it was quiet is what comes out when it's loud. So let me tell you what I practiced. For 63 years, before that Tuesday, I practiced being useful. That was the whole religion of my house growing up, off Allegheny Avenue, in a family that came over with one suitcase and a great deal of pride. My mother used to say a woman's worth is what she carries for other people. She meant it as a compliment. I wore it like a coat for most of my life and never noticed how heavy a coat can get. Tadeusz noticed. My husband. He drove a delivery route for 30 years and had hands like warm bricks, and he used to take that coat off my shoulders without saying a word. Make the coffee, run the bath, tell me to sit. He died 4 years ago this past March. Heart. He was here, and then there was a Tuesday, and then he wasn't. I dispatched my own husband's ambulance. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I have had to. I heard the address come up on the board and I knew the address. I kept my voice flat. I sent the right help. The help was not enough. I finished my shift. I have never told anyone that I finished my shift, but I did, because the calls kept coming and someone had to answer them, and being useful was the only thing I knew how to do with my hands while my chest caved in. So when Daniel asked 8 months later if he and Brittany could move in, "Just a couple months, Ma, while we get on our feet," I said yes before he finished the sentence. Of course I said yes. The house was too quiet. My hands were empty. And he was my boy. Let me be fair to him, because this story isn't a knife, and I'm not interested in using it like one. Daniel is not a cruel man. He is a soft man who married a hard plan, and somewhere in there he stopped being able to tell the difference between his comfort and his right to it. He has his father's hands and none of his father's stillness. When he was small, he used to climb into my lap during thunderstorms, and I'd put my mouth against his hair and say the thing I said to every frightened caller, "I'm here. Tell me what's happening." He believed me then. That's the part that still gets me. They moved in March. By June, the couple of months had quietly become the arrangement, and nobody ever said so out loud, because the things that take your life are almost never announced. They just accumulate. A box of receipts is really just a record of things nobody announced. Here is how it accumulates, in case you've never watched it happen from the inside. First, it's groceries. You're already at the store, you pick up theirs. Then it's the electric bill, because the first baby, my grandson, who I love past all sense, needs the house warm, and somehow the bill comes to me now. Then Brittany's car needs work, and Daniel is between things. And you have a card, and you say, "Use mine, just this once," and "just this once" is the most expensive sentence in the English language. Then there's an automatic transfer set up to their account to make it simpler, and you stop looking at it because looking at it makes you feel like the kind of mother who counts. I didn't count. For 3 years I refused to count. That refusal cost me, by my own arithmetic at that kitchen table, a sum I will get to, a big one, bigger than I was ready for. But I want to be precise about the worst of it, and the worst of it was never the money. The worst of it was the Thursday in September, 6 weeks before the nursery call, when I came home early from my friend Renata's because my knee was acting up, and I heard them in the kitchen, and they didn't hear me. And Brittany was laughing about something, and Daniel said my name, and then Brittany said the sentence I have not been able to put down since. She's basically the babysitter who pays us. And my son, my boy who climbed into my lap during storms. My son laughed. I did not go into the kitchen. I want you to know that, because for 31 years my entire job was going toward the thing everyone else runs from, and on that Thursday in September, I stood in my own hallway and I did not go in. I went back out the front door. I sat on the stoop, the marble step Tadeusz used to scrub on Saturdays, the way his mother taught him, so the neighbors would know somebody cared. And I waited for my own heart to come down off the line. Situation or crisis. I ran the question on myself, the way I'd run it 10,000 times on strangers. What is happening right now? And for the first time, the honest answer scared me, so I did what frightened people do. I told myself it was a situation. Loud, manageable. I'd keep it flat. I'd keep handling it. I went back in 20 minutes later and made everyone dinner. That is not a noble detail. I include it because it's true, and because if you've ever done it, you already forgave me before I asked. But something had changed, even if I wasn't ready to call it by name. That night, after they'd gone up, I got the shoebox down from the closet. It had old photographs in it then, and I dumped the photographs onto the bed and I started, for the first time, to keep the receipts. Not as a weapon. I need you to understand the difference, because it's the whole difference. I wasn't building a case. A dispatcher doesn't build a case. A dispatcher builds a record. Times, addresses, what was said, what was done, so that when the moment comes, the facts are already standing there, calm, in a row, and nobody can scream them into something they weren't. I had spent my life making records of other people's emergencies. I started making one of my own. So I had it ready that gray Tuesday when Brittany called about the nursery. I want to lay it out for you the way I laid it out for myself on the kitchen table, because the numbers are the part people don't believe, and I was a woman who built her whole life on the principle that the number is the number. The automatic transfer was $840 a month. I'd set it up myself in the spring of the first year, just to make it simpler. 3 years, less the 2 months before it started. 34 transfers, $28,560. The card. The one I said use just this once. I went back through 3 years of statements at that table, line by line, the way I'd review a night's call log. Brittany's car, twice. A vacation to Myrtle Beach I was not invited on. A crib for the new baby. That cost more than my first car. Restaurant after restaurant on nights I ate alone here. The card came to $41,210. The household. The electric, the gas, the water, the taxes on a house that is mine, the groceries, the heater. I never fixed for myself while their room stayed warm. I had every bill, just under $52,000 across the 3 years. And then the small one, the one that wasn't large but that I could not stop looking at. $240. A pair of winter boots, good ones, lined, that I had put in an online cart 11 separate times over 2 years and removed 11 times because the money was always needed somewhere warmer than my own feet. I sat there and I added it. $121,770, plus a pair of boots I never let myself buy. That was the cost, not of raising a child. You don't bill for that, I never would. That was the cost of 3 years of being, in my daughter-in-law's words, the babysitter who pays. The price of never once asking what is happening right now about my own life. I looked at that number for a long time. The house was quiet. They were out, at her sister's, with my grandson, who I would have walked into traffic for and still would, and I noticed something. Sitting there, I was waiting for the wave. The grief, the rage, the heat behind the eyes. 31 years of other people's worst minutes, and I knew exactly what the wave felt like and exactly how to keep my voice flat under it. The wave didn't come. What came instead was the quietest thing I have felt since the day Tadeusz died. Not anger, not even sadness quite. Clarity. Cold and clean as the marble step in November. I picked up my phone, not to call anyone, to open the banking app I had been refusing to open for 3 years. The app made me reset my password. That's how long it had been since I'd looked. 3 years of refusing to count, and the machine itself had forgotten me. I sat at the table and I read my own life, the way I used to read a call board at the start of a shift. All of it at once, no flinching, looking for what was actually on fire. And here is what I learned, scrolling backward through my own money in the blue light of a kitchen at 11 at night. I was not poor. That surprised me. I had let myself feel poor. The heater, the boots, the clearance shoes. But Thaddeus and I were savers in the old way, the envelope way, and his pension and mine and 31 years of a city paycheck I barely touched had left me with more than I'd allowed myself to know. The house was paid off in 2019. There was a retirement account I hadn't opened the statement on in 2 years. There was, sitting in plain savings, doing nothing, a little over $260,000. I had been living like a woman with nothing, so that two people who had everything could feel like they had a little more. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is the part where you might expect the trap to spring. You've heard stories like mine, and you're waiting for the secret, the deed in a name they didn't expect, the lawyer who's been waiting by the phone, the document that drops like a hammer and ends them. I understand the appeal. For 31 years, I sent hammers. I sent police and fire and medics toward people who'd earned them. But I wasn't going to send a hammer at my own son. There was no secret. That's what I need you to hear. I didn't have a trick up my sleeve. What I had was simpler and, it turns out, harder. I had a hand on a faucet. I had been leaving open, and I had, for the first time in my life, permission from myself to turn it. That's not a weapon. That's a boundary. And I'll tell you, having spent my whole life confusing the two, having been raised to believe that closing a door was the same as throwing a punch, it took me longer to pick up the phone for that than it ever took to dispatch a unit to a fire. I made a list, not of revenge, of moves. A dispatcher's list. Clear, ordered. Each step a real action with a real time on it. 1. The automatic transfer. $840 a month, the next one due in 9 days. I would stop it, not dramatically. I would simply not send money I had never agreed, out loud, to send. 2. The card. I would call the bank in the morning and cancel the authorized user. Brittany's name would come off it within 2 hours. The woman on the line would later tell me, and I would think, 2 hours. I gave it 3 years. 3. The house. This was the one that kept me up. Because the house was the nursery, and the nursery was the eviction nobody had the nerve to call an eviction. I was not going to put my son and my grandson on the street. I want that on the record. But I was also not going to be moved out of the room where my husband died so that the people moving me out could have it. So the third move wasn't a hammer either. It was a question, and I decided I would ask it to their faces, calm, the way I'd ask 10,000 strangers, what is happening right now? And then I would say the true answer out loud, in my own kitchen, where for 3 years the true answer had been laughed at instead of spoken. I did not call a lawyer. I called one person. Her name is Renata Bauer. She is 71, and she was my partner on nights for 19 years, the only other woman who knows what it is to keep your voice flat while a stranger dies in your ear. She picked up on the second ring, the way she always has, because dispatchers don't let a phone ring out. It's wired into us. It's a thing we cannot do. Marta, she said, not quick thing, just my name, the real way, the Polish way Tadeusz said it. I added it up, Ren, I said. My voice did not shake. It never does. I need to read you a number, and then I need you to tell me I'm not the villain for what I'm about to do. There was a pause on the line. The good kind. The kind that means someone is actually listening. Read me the number, she said. So I did. And Renata Bauer, who has heard everything a phone can carry, was quiet for a moment. And then she said the 11 words that I have carried with me ever since, the ones that finally let me turn the faucet. Part 5-8. You spent your whole life answering. Answer your own call now. That's what Renata said. 11 words. I wrote them on the back of a receipt. The boots, the $240 boots I never bought, and I propped it against the chipped coffee pot where I'd see it in the morning. If you've ever stood at the edge of a decision your whole upbringing told you was selfish, you know that you don't need new information. You need permission. Renata gave me mine. The rest was just doing it in order, calmly, the way I do everything. I slept. That surprised me too. The woman who hadn't slept right since March slept like the dead and woke before the alarm, and the house was still dark, and I made the coffee in the chipped pot, and I did not let it go cold this time. I drank it looking at 11 words on the back of a receipt. Then I made the calls. It was a Wednesday. I remember because the bank's hold music was playing a Christmas song in late October, and I sat through all 4 minutes of it without once feeling the urge to hang up. The card first. I'd like to remove an authorized user. The woman asked me 3 security questions, and I answered them in the flat voice, the dispatcher voice, and she said, "That's done, ma'am. The card will be declined on her end the next time she tries to use it." Usually within a couple of hours. Within a couple of hours. I thanked her. I meant it. The transfer next. $840 scheduled in 8 days, canceled with 2 taps and a confirmation screen that asked if I was sure. I have been asked if I was sure a great many times in my life, usually by a machine, usually about something that didn't matter. I looked at the question a moment. Then I tapped yes. That was it. That was the whole arsenal, a canceled card and a stopped transfer. No lawyer, no hammer, no document read aloud in a courtroom. I sat in my kitchen and I had, with 2 phone calls and 2 taps, simply stopped handing my life to people who had stopped saying thank you for it. It felt, I will tell you honestly, like almost nothing. It felt like turning off a tap you'd left running so long you'd stopped hearing the water. The water, though, the people downstream of the water, they heard it stop. It took 6 days. The transfer didn't go through on the 1st of the month, and a card got declined at a restaurant on a Friday night. Brittany's, in front of her sister, which I did not plan and will not pretend I'm entirely sorry about. And on Saturday morning, the loudness began. It started, of course, as concern. That's how it always starts when someone realizes the convenient version of you is gone. First, they check if you're broken. Daniel knocked on my bedroom door. My room, the future nursery. Holding his phone, his face doing the soft, worried thing it did when he was small and the storm was close. "Ma, something's wrong with the accounts." The card got declined and Brittany said the transfer didn't. "Is everything okay? Are you okay? Did you get scammed? Did somebody get into your bank?" And there it was. The most honest sentence my son had said to me in 3 years, and he didn't even know it. Did somebody get into your bank? As if the only way the money could stop was a stranger taking it. As if I could not possibly be the one who closed my own hand. I looked at my boy, his father's hands, his father's worried mouth. And I asked him the only question I have ever really known how to ask. "Daniel," I said, "what is happening right now?" He blinked. "What?" "It's a real question. The card, the transfer, the nursery. Tell me what's happening right now, in this house. I'd like to hear you say it out loud." He didn't have an answer. People rarely do when you ask them the true question instead of the comfortable one. He stood in my doorway holding his phone, and behind him, coming up the stairs, I heard the faster, harder footsteps of someone who had already decided the answer, who was already turning the situation loud so that nobody would have to hear how quiet the real thing was. Brittany reached the top of the stairs. "Martha," she said, and her voice had a brightness to it like a knife held up to catch the light. "We need to talk about what you've done." And I set down my coffee. Gently, chipped to the wall, and I thought, "No, dear, we need to talk about what was done. There's a difference, and I have it in a shoebox. I have been screamed at by professionals. I want you to keep that in mind for what comes next. For 31 years, strangers gave me the worst version of themselves down a phone line. Drunk, terrified, furious, grieving. And my whole craft was to stay so level that my calm became contagious until the person on the other end borrowed enough of it to tell me where they were. You cannot rattle a night shift dispatcher in her own kitchen. People try. It's almost touching. "What I've done?" I repeated, not a question. I picked the shoebox up off the dresser and I carried it past both of them, down the stairs, and I set it in the middle of the kitchen table, on the spot where Tadeusz used to do the crossword. They followed me down the way people follow the calmest person in the room, which is a thing I have counted on my entire life. "Sit," I said. And they sat. That surprised all three of us. I did not raise my voice. I have never needed to. I took the lid off the box. "This is 3 years," I said. "I'm going to tell you what's in it, and I'm going to use the real numbers, because in my experience, the real number is the only thing in a room like this that can't be argued with." I laid it out the way I'd laid it out for myself. The transfer, $28,560. The card, $41,210. The household, the bills, the warm rooms, just under $52,000. I said the total once, plainly. $121,770. I did not say it like an accusation. I said it like an address read off a call board. Flat. True, this is where we are. Brittany recovered first. They always do, the ones who run loud. So that's what this is. You kept receipts. She said it like I'd done something filthy. You've been keeping score on your own family. On your grandson. Do you hear yourself? After everything we are raising a child in this house, Martha, and you're sitting here with a shoebox like some bitter old. Brittany. Daniel's voice, quiet. He was looking at the box, not at me. Stop! No, she needs to hear. Stop! And he said it the way his father used to, and it landed, because some part of Daniel is still made of the man who taught him, and that part had just woken up at the kitchen table and seen 3 years for the first time. I want to tell you, I felt triumphant in that moment. I didn't. I felt the thing I have been trying to describe to you this whole time and have only one word for. Clear. I felt clear. I'm not asking for the money, I said. And I watched both of their faces do something complicated because they had braced for a hammer and I had set down something else entirely. I want to be very plain because I spent 31 years being plain when it counted. I am not asking you to pay me back. I'm not putting my grandson on the street. I'm not throwing you out of this house tonight. The relief that crossed Daniel's face nearly broke me. I kept my voice flat. You hold steady or people die. But this is what's true now, I said. The card is closed. That's already done. The transfer is stopped. That's done too. The house is mine. It stays mine. The room upstairs stays mine. There will be no nursery in my room. If you want to keep living here, you'll live here as adults who pay their share, and you'll ask me for things the way you'd ask a person you respect. In advance, out loud, and with the word no on the table as a real possibility. Because for 3 years it never was, and a yes that can't become a no isn't generosity. It's just a faucet someone forgot to mention they'd left running. Brittany opened her mouth. I held up one hand. The flat hand, the one I'd raised at no one for 31 years because you can't raise a hand down a phone line, and it felt strange and good to finally use it. I'm not finished, I said. There's one more thing I'm doing. And this part isn't about you at all. I reached into the bottom of the shoebox, under the receipts, and took out the only thing in there that wasn't a record of what I'd lost. It was a printout, a single page. I printed it the night before at the library because my own printer was out of ink, and I'd never thought myself worth the cartridge. I slid it across the table, across Tadeusz's crossword spot, and let them read what their babysitter who pays had quietly done with the rest of her one life. It was an itinerary, 41 days. A ship out of New York, down the eastern seaboard, through the Panama Canal. The canal. Tadeusz talked about his whole life and never saw, because there was always a route to drive and a son to raise and a bill that came first. He used to keep a photograph of the locks taped inside his locker at the depot. After he died, I found it, and I put it in my wallet, and I had carried it for 4 years, the way you carry a thing you've decided you don't deserve. The trip cost $6,800. I had booked it at the library computer at 9:40 the night before, while my own son slept down the hall believing I was broke. I'd sat in the quiet of the reference section and I'd put in the card. My card, the one with no one else's name on it now, and the screen had asked me, again, if I was sure. I was sure. Daniel read the page. I watched him get to the word Panama, and I watched his face come apart because he knew about the photograph. He'd seen it in his father's locker as a boy. He looked up at me and his eyes were wet and he said, "Ma, just that," the way he used to say it from inside a thunderstorm, and for the first time in 3 years the word didn't have a request hanging off the end of it. "I leave in March," I said, "the anniversary. I'll be on the water the day he died, instead of in this kitchen pretending I finished my shift 4 years ago. I didn't, you know. I never clocked out. I just kept answering. That's what I'm doing now. I'm answering my own call." Brittany was still at the table. I want to be fair to her because a story told only from the inside of my own grievance isn't a true record, an ideal in true records. She wasn't a monster. She was a frightened person who had built her comfort on a foundation she'd assumed would never speak, and it had spoken, and now she was doing the math she should have done 3 years ago. I watched her do it. I watched her realize that the convenient version of me was gone and was not coming back, and that what was left was a woman she'd have to actually know. "Where are we supposed to go?" she said, not cruel now, smaller. The loudness all run out of her. While you're gone. If we have to pay our share. We can't. Daniel's hours got cut. We genuinely can't. And here is the part I have thought about most in all the months since, because I could have let it land on her. God knows 3 years had earned me the right. The reckoning was right there, easy as a button, and a harder woman than me would have pressed it. But I have sent help to 10,000 people who did not deserve a single thing except the help. That's the job. You don't triage by who's earned it. You triage by what's actually on fire. "Daniel," I said, "look at me. Your hours got cut." "When?" he told me. 6 weeks ago, around the time of the nursery call. Around the time the demands got loudest, because that's what frightened people do. I know it better than anyone alive. When the real crisis is quiet, they make a situation loud so they don't have to say the true thing out loud. We're scared. We don't have it. We've been hiding it from you behind a color scheme for a nursery. "You should have told me that," I said, "instead of measuring my room." And my voice did, for the first time in this whole telling, for the first time since the address came up on the board 4 years ago. My voice did the thing it never does. It shook. Just once. I let it. It was an itinerary, 41 days. A ship out of New York, down the eastern seaboard, through the Panama Canal. The canal. Tadeusz talked about his whole life and never saw, because there was always a route to drive and a son to raise and a bill that came first. He used to keep a photograph of the locks taped inside his locker at the depot. After he died, I found it and I put it in my wallet, and I had carried it for 4 years the way you carry a thing you've decided you don't deserve. The trip cost $6,800. I had booked it at the library computer at 9:40 the night before, while my own son slept down the hall believing I was broke. I'd sat in the quiet of the reference section and I'd put in the card, my card, the one with no one else's name on it now, and the screen had asked me, again, if I was sure. I was sure. Daniel read the page. I watched him get to the word Panama, and I watched his face come apart, because he knew about the photograph. He'd seen it in his father's locker as a boy. He looked up at me and his eyes were wet and he said, "Ma." Just that, the way he used to say it from inside a thunderstorm, and for the first time in 3 years the word didn't have a request hanging off the end of it. "I leave in March," I said, "the anniversary. I'll be on the water the day he died instead of in this kitchen pretending I finished my shift 4 years ago. I didn't, you know. I never clocked out. I just kept answering. That's what I'm doing now. I'm answering my own call. Brittany was still at the table. I want to be fair to her, because a story told only from the inside of my own grievance isn't a true record, and I deal in true records. She wasn't a monster. She was a frightened person who had built her comfort on a foundation she'd assumed would never speak, and it had spoken, and now she was doing the math she should have done 3 years ago. I watched her do it. I watched her realize that the convenient version of me was gone and was not coming back, and that what was left was a woman she'd have to actually know. "Where are we supposed to go?" she said, not cruel now, smaller, the loudness all run out of her. While you're gone. If we have to pay our share. We can't. Daniel's hours got cut. We genuinely can't. And here is the part I have thought about most in all the months since, because I could have let it land on her. God knows 3 years had earned me the right. The reckoning was right there, easy as a button, and a harder woman than me would have pressed it. But I have sent help to 10,000 people who did not deserve a single thing except the help. That's the job. You don't triage by who's earned it. You triage by what's actually on fire. "Daniel," I said, "look at me. Your hours got cut." "When?" he told me. 6 weeks ago, around the time of the nursery call. Around the time the demands got loudest. Because that's what frightened people do. I know it better than anyone alive. When the real crisis is quiet, they make a situation loud, so they don't have to say the true thing out loud. We're scared. We don't have it. We've been hiding it from you behind a color scheme for a nursery. You should have told me that, I said, instead of measuring my room. And my voice did. For the first time in this whole telling, for the first time since the address came up on the board 4 years ago, my voice did the thing it never does. It shook. Just once. I let it.